Welcome back to Galactic Wisdom. Now, I am on a 2-month tour and I just have a few more days to go left of the tour. I'm pre-recording this episode. I actually had to pre-record 10 episodes for when I was away over the 2-month period. And this is the 10th episode that I'm pre-recording. And I just have a few more days to go on this contact tour. If you're interested in attending any of my final events, there will be events in Skinwalker Ranch or close to Skinwalker Ranch, and then in the Uinta Mountains, about an hour from Skinwalker Ranch, and then further south, there's going to be one alien contact event in Las Vegas, where we will be connecting with our friends, the Tall Whites. If you would like to attend any of those events, then please just email me at rupertcontactguy@gmail.com. Now, last week on Galactic Wisdom, I examined the reality and the morality of a couple of sci-fi shows and movies, Doctor Who and Star Wars. Now, my intention had been to do several shows and movies in that one episode, but it turns out I had far more to say about Doctor Who and Star Wars than I had originally thought I would have. And so I didn't have any time left to talk about other shows. So today I'm going to continue to talk about some sci-fi shows and movies. I'm going to focus today on Star Trek and Babylon 5, both extremely good TV shows with some movies. And possibly other shows and movies if there is time. Why am I doing this? Well, we live in a world that is sometimes very challenging, sometimes very harsh. Sometimes it's not easy to get through our lives. And it does help to have somewhere we can go where we can feel the best of what humanity can imagine. And shows like Babylon 5 and Star Trek help to give us that. Now, there's a lot of shows out there, a lot of movies out there, and many of them are entertaining in many different ways. There's a small number of them that are more than just entertaining. They show us a better side of humanity. They show us characters who are able to, in spite of challenges, keep going and be good people and survive and thrive. And so I encourage everybody to, every once in a while, sit down and watch one of those TV shows, not that's full of unresolved conflict, but that contains people who really we can look up to in a way that we're looking up to them because they're very strong in their morality. That's why I like Doctor Who. The Doctor is very moral. It's why I like Star Wars, because you got Luke Skywalker, who always tries to do the right thing and ends up being the force that is able to save the galaxy. And it's why I like shows like Star Trek and Babylon 5. And I'm going to explain those latter two shows to you now. It occurred to me that you probably noticed that behind me over there, I have some shelves with some Star Wars toys. What is a grown man doing with toys on his shelves? Well, let me tell you, when I was a child, and, my childhood, it wasn't really bad, but it also wasn't really good. There were challenges and hardships, and there were a few things in my life that helped me get through. There were a few things in my life that inspired me. When I discovered Star Wars figures, and then I discovered the Star Wars movies, those were inspiring. They showed me in the battle of good versus evil that if the good perseveres, then the good can win. And it's also amazing adventure. And I love thinking about what's out there in the universe, different alien species. I love things like spacecraft and technology. So, there were a lot of reasons. But Star Wars was inspiring to me. So I started to collect the Star Wars figures, and a good number of these figures behind me are the original Star Wars figures that I had when I was a kid. And I pick up some of those Star Wars figures and I look at them and I tune into that feeling of being a kid and seeing this figure and feeling inspired by the journey that this character in the movies was going through. And I still get that when I look at some of these right now. Now, a lot of you will know that even though I'm English, I live in America. I live in California. And when I moved over to this country initially, I couldn't bring all my stuff over with me. And I put my Star Wars toys into storage. And a few years ago, maybe only about 5 years ago, I went back to England to take all of my Star Wars toys out of storage. I had already taken the previous year some of my childhood figures out of storage and brought them back here. But when I went back there, the most recent time, they had all been stolen. There was some individual who had seen those Star Wars toys, probably thought, well, they're going to cost a bit of money now. They might be able to make some money from them. They stole them all, including lots of the spacecraft and the play sets. And I was very sad to see those go, not just because they're material pieces of plastic, not just because they're toys, but because they were a big part of my childhood, a big part of my inspiration, a big part of why I'm here today on this show talking about galactic wisdom. And they were gone, and there was no way of getting them back. What I then started to do, even though I was and still am very sad about that, what I started to do was collect some of the more recent releases of these figures and of these vehicles and toys. And now the ones that are being released are really not toys. They're more like collector's items. They're far more intricate. That's just a little bit about me to help you understand why I'm so inspired by sci-fi, things like Star Wars, the battle of good versus evil. And that's why I have Star Wars toys behind me. Incidentally, if any of you have any old Star Wars toys lying around in your attic or basement that you don't want, please do let me know, because I still haven't replaced all of the things that I lost. So we are going to now talk not about Star Wars, but about Star Trek. I like both. I like Star Wars, I like Star Trek. They're both very different from each other, and I'm not going to go into all of the details about how they're different. Right now I'm going to talk about Star Trek, and I'm going to examine Star Trek from two perspectives. How real is Star Trek, the reality, and also the morality of Star Trek, how moral. Let's go with the reality first. Well, as with Star Wars, there's some things that are not particularly realistic. You hear the spacecraft when they're flying through space, things like that, laser beams fired through space, you see them, even though you shouldn't see laser beams unless they're going directly into your eyes. There are some things that are not very real, but there's a lot of things in Star Trek that are quite realistic. It's good science fiction. Science fiction are stories or universes or situations that are based in the reality of science and reasonable extrapolations of science into the future. And science fiction is different to fantasy, which really you can make up anything at all and just say that's a law of the reality in this in a certain place. So Star Trek is good science fiction. Now, the creator of Star Trek was Gene Roddenberry. And there are stories, and I do not know if these stories are true, But there are stories that Gene Roddenberry, before he created Star Trek, was working in the military, was some kind of documentarian or secretary or something, and he was put in a situation where, although he wasn't sort of in charge, he was put in a situation where he either got to see real UFOs or aliens, or got to work with people who knew about them. And there are things in his vision of Star Trek, in his Star Trek TV series and later the movies, which are actually quite close to the reality of the alien community that we live around. We're not part of that community, but it is certainly around us. Now, in Star Trek, there is a union of planets called the Federation of Planets, and the Federation has officials, dignitaries that meet in like a council type situation. And I happen to know through my interactions with advanced non-human entities that there is such a thing as a galactic federation, or a galactic federation and a galactic council. Now, how much of the galaxy this federation encompasses, I'm not sure. I feel like it's probably a relatively local region of the galaxy, maybe like a tenth of the galaxy, that sort of size. And I say that because a lot of the entities that are part of this the real Galactic Federation, are humanoid, which suggests that they have strong connections to the planet Earth. But there is this federation, and they do have a galactic council, and I remote view to, I astrally project to and remote view with, and remotely communicate with the galactic council, the real galactic council. And so the galactic federation, the real galactic federation around us, is very similar to the Federation of Planets in Star Trek. Could it be that Gene Roddenberry based his Federation of Planets on the real Galactic Federation that we have around us? It seems very likely. There is something in Star Trek called the Prime Directive. It is a very strict rule that everybody in Starfleet and the Federation is supposed to follow, that they do not interfere with other species, with their development. They don't get involved in internal conflicts. So if, for example, the Star Trek Federation were from the outside looking at a planet like the Earth, where there's a lot of turmoil and conflict and wars going on, that Federation in Star Trek would not get involved in trying to solve the hostilities on the planet. And that's something actually in reality we notice from these alien beings that are around us. They don't get involved. They support people as individuals who are doing good work. They guide people together to form coalitions of light, as I describe them. But they don't get involved militarily, they don't interfere, and they don't come in and try and control us. All of those things in Star Trek, there's many episodes where the wisdom of not interfering in that way is very visible. And we know that if the aliens that are around us came in and started trying to control what we're doing, humanity would not react well to that. So this Prime Directive is something that many people think Gene Roddenberry got the idea from the real aliens that are around us. They don't interfere with us. And maybe they have their own version of the Prime Directive. It's actually not such a bad rule for individuals to take on as well. To go around interfering in other people's business is not very wise. When somebody interferes with you and in a way that you don't like, you as an individual, it makes sense because you're you are yourself, you have your own feelings, your emotions, you know the reality of the situation pretty well. So for you to respond to somebody, for example, attacking you or being mean to you or interacting with you in a way you don't like, it makes perfect sense. Even though you don't know the motivations necessarily of the person, you are automatically involved. But when you see other people in other countries, other people on social media, in the news around you, that you see in documentaries on YouTube and things, if you watch something like that and then you interfere in a way that you're pushing in where you haven't been asked, that you're on very, very shaky ground. Because you don't know those people. You don't know the experiences they've had, their motivations for doing what they're doing. You do not have all the facts. And you can't get all of the facts unless you're them. And so the Prime Directive is actually, a really good rule to take on board yourself. If we could all just not interfere with each other, the world would be so much better. So I'm talking about both the morality and the reality of Star Trek, actually, at the moment. There's some good real science in Star Trek, good science fiction. Warp engines, for example, and impulse engines. Star Trek, people who know Star Trek will know that these spacecraft that move through space, there's something called an impulse engine. An impulse is a force that's put on something for a certain amount of time. Impulse engines make things move. This is all basic, real science. Newton's laws of motion are all involved in impulse engines. So from that aspect, the vessels in Star Trek are quite realistic. The warp engines in Star Trek, there is a theory, a scientific theory, that if you could warp space around an object, you might be able to somehow push that object forwards, like the object is sort of surfing on waves of space. That might sound a little bit odd, but we do know that space can be warped. For example, space is warped by large gravitational objects like the sun. That's basically how gravity works. So it's not unreasonable to think that we might in the future be able to warp space in order to create some kind of a pushing technology where we can push craft through space due to warping space. Then we have realities in Star Trek that are not scientific realities, but paranormal realities like telepathy and spiritual empathy, psychic empathy. Telepathy is when you can hear the thoughts of another person or you can talk to them in your mind. Aliens can do that. The real aliens around us communicate via telepathy. And when they communicate with us, it's almost always telepathic communication. There are some people on the planet, as I've said in previous episodes of Galactic Wisdom, who are extremely good at telepathy. I know some who practice quite a lot, and they've got these protocols, these methodologies that they've practiced to help them read people's thoughts or see images that other people put into their minds. Some people, a few people on this planet are just exceptionally good at telepathy. The person I mentioned last week was Lior Suchard, who is an entertainer. You can find him in videos of chat shows. He goes around being a chat show guest, but on those shows he does telepathy sometimes, and he does manifestation. It's fascinating to watch because some of it is obviously sort of like a magician will manipulate and give illusions, but a lot of it just is psychic stuff. I wonder what is enabling him to be able to do that. I wonder if if he's entirely human. I don't know. I don't know the answers. I would love to find out one day. But telepathy is a real part, something real in our universe. How about empathy? One of the ways in which I am psychic is I'm not so good at telepathy, but I can look at somebody and connect with their spirit. I can think of somebody and connect with their spirit. I can look at a photograph of them and connect with their spirit. And when I do that, I know what they're feeling. I can feel what they're feeling. If I think of a friend of mine, I generally know if they're having a good day or a bad day. If I'm in a relationship with somebody, the same thing. If I think of somebody, often it causes them to think of me, or vice versa, and then we end up calling or texting each other at exactly the same time. So when I look into somebody's eyes or I think of somebody, I know what their feelings are, and the closer I am to them in terms of a friendship, the stronger I get that feeling. There have been occasions in the past where a friend I've had has thought badly of me for, I don't know, something I said, for example. And when I think of them, I can tell if they're thinking, badly of me at that time. It's a very interesting gift to have, or skill or talent, but that is something that is real. And in Star Trek, there are empaths. Now, they kind of mix the words up. In Star Trek, empaths, telepaths, they kind of mix the two together. But really, for example, Counselor Deanna Troi, she's supposed to only really be empathic. She can pick up on the emotions of others. She can tell if people are telling the truth or lying. Well, I've got that ability, not as strong as she has, but I've got that, and a lot of other people have also. So, yes, Star Trek has things like that in there, which are real paranormal abilities. And Star Wars is very similar. Star Wars has the Force and telepathy going on in there as well. Maybe some of these ingredients are helping both Star Trek and Star Wars to be appealing to people. There's also a bit of bad writing in Star Trek, unfortunately. It's not just one writer all the time. As a scientist, sometimes I look at what they say in shows like Star Trek or movies or shows like Star Trek and Star Wars, and I cringe at some of the things they say. There was one episode of Star Trek where they had a candle that had some kind of internal power source. I don't know how the candle worked, but the flame, they kept referring to this candle as a plasma candle with a plasma flame. Now, flames are plasma. That is what a flame is. You've got 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, plasma. You heat up a solid, it turns into a liquid. You heat up a liquid, turns into a gas. You heat up a gas, the gas becomes ionized and becomes a plasma. That's what fire is, that's what lightning is, that's what the sun is. And they kept referring in this Star Trek episode to this plasma candle with a plasma flame, like it was some special, unique form of candle. It's like, no, all candles are plasma candles. So yeah, there's a few cringeworthy things like that in the show. But on the whole, Star Trek is pretty good. They had some fairly decent scientists working on the show. So in terms of reality, yeah, Star Trek is not bad. How about morality? Well, the Federation of Planets and Starfleet are generally a moral body. They're generally moral organizations. They try and do the good thing. The crew of the Enterprise, they're very good at working together. This is one of the reasons why I like Star Trek so much. And I do like the original series, but I'm more interested in, I like more The Next Generation. I was like at university when that was coming out, and I really enjoyed Star Trek Next Generation. It fed me, those episodes feed and nourish me with morality and with excitement and inspiration and adventure. The idea that you can have a group of people working together efficiently, without conflict, in a very harmonious, efficient, effective way, so that when they deal with situations and beings that are hard and challenging and dangerous, you see the way they work together to solve the problems. That's why I like Star Trek, because the idea of working with other people or other beings in a harmonious way, a constructive, harmonious, efficient way, that is very appealing to me. And so Next Generation did that pretty well. But again, as I said last week, in my show last week, that's hard for writers to be able to write harmonious interactions, harmonious constructive interactions with others. I personally am very attracted to that sort of relationship dynamic, but a lot of writers just don't get that. If I said last week, it's hard for a writer to write what they don't know, what they don't understand. And if they are not the kind of person who is in harmony with the universe and with others, how are they going to write that in an effective way? It's easy for a harmonious person to look at others and see how they're bickering with each other and in conflict with each other. And it's easy for a harmonious person who is a writer to write about conflict, because you can see it happening all around. It's not hard to understand. It's based in ignorance and lack of intelligence and lack of integrity and lack of understanding. And it's easy to come down to that level. What's hard is for somebody who is embroiled in conflict and cynicism and disrespectfulness to look up to people who are able to operate in harmony with each other. So, as has happened with Doctor Who and with Star Wars, modern Star Trek writers, some of them have sought to find drama in the conflict within the members of Starfleet, within the members of a crew. And I just think that's very sloppy, bad writing that goes against Gene Roddenberry's initial vision. One character in particular that I like in Star Trek Next Generation is Captain Picard. And if I compare, if you watch the first few episodes of the original series of Star Trek with the first few episodes of the Next Generation of Star Trek, in the original series, you watch those first few episodes, and basically when they encounter something they don't understand, something new, something different, a new higher consciousness, or a new being or creature, they try and kill it. They try and capture it, destroy it, take away its powers. They're not very understanding. One episode in particular in the original series, which frustrates me, is there was a creature, the last of the creature's kind, who ate salt. They needed salt. And this creature, in order to get salt, would, I guess, suck or draw the salt out of people, therefore killing those people. And it's not that this creature was bad. Well, I guess they were bad for those people, but they didn't have a bad heart. They weren't evil. They were just trying to survive. And, morality, I think that it's moral to do what is practically necessary for your survival most of the time. And so they discovered that this creature was eating people's salt, and that's why the creature was going around killing people. Now, had that been Captain Picard, he would have said, oh, great, let's just give this creature all the salt that it needs. Problem solved. But no, in the original series of Star Trek, they were like, oh, all this creature needs is salt, let's go and kill it. And that's basically what happened. In The Next Generation, Captain Picard is far more thoughtful. He's a wise character. And I think that in my youth, I looked up to Captain Picard and I thought, this is a good role model. The Doctor was a good role model. Luke Skywalker was one of my role models. Captain Picard was another one of my role models. And if you watch the episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, the captain really tries very hard to do what is moral, what is right. And he really thinks things through. And he doesn't just follow rules and regulations. He certainly doesn't shoot or attack, even in self-defense, unless he absolutely needs to. He wants to try to establish a peaceful, loving relationship with the other beings in the galaxy. That's his mission, to seek out new life and new civilizations. That's pretty much my mission as well, to seek out new life, new civilizations in the galaxy, to befriend them, to spread throughout the universe and including this planet, peace, love, and happiness. So if you ever are interested in watching a sci-fi show and you don't know where to start, watch Star Trek The Next Generation. Very sadly, they took Captain Picard. Recent writers of Picard, they didn't know how to write such a wonderful character. They therefore made him a grumpy old man who just can't get along with people anymore and makes mistakes, and everybody has to bail him out and he has to listen to other people for a change. And okay, well, it's interesting drama, but you've just destroyed my role model. Why do writers do that? Why can't they understand that when there are characters like Picard and Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Doctor, people like them, they're drawn to them because of how special they are. And in order to keep them being special, you have to keep writing them as those same people. I just had a notification. You don't get really good people suddenly turning to the dark side of the Force unless there is really, really, really some kind of special circumstance. But people's characters, they just don't change like that. In the way that they took those three characters that I'm talking about and ruined them. Sorry, I'm venting a little bit. It's okay because I'm not naming specific names here. If I were to, I have a philosophy that I don't criticize individual people because that leads to conflict. But if I keep my comments general, then writers out there, whoever they are, will listen to what I say, not be personally offended, and not need to attack me back. And harmony and peace continues. And maybe what I'm saying will lead to, I've got a noisy bike outside, hopefully through what I'm saying, I might even get some of the writers in the future to help the betterment of the planet. You've got Data. Data is an interesting character in Star Trek. Data is an android, and he wasn't built with emotions. And that whole emotional thing is very interesting. And you have Data's character, who is really a very moral person, even though he doesn't understand emotions, which is very interesting because morality is largely about how we affect the emotions, the well-being of others. And if Data doesn't get emotions, but he's still a good person, how does that work? But he's a fascinating character. And I think a lot of times it's a shame that humans compliment him by saying, well, you're acting very human now. When in fact I find Data's character to be far more moral than most human characters that I know. But Data had a evil twin brother called Law, and the dynamic between them is interesting. Law has emotions, Data doesn't. What is it that makes one person bad and another person good? Is it the programming of these two characters? Is it experiences that people have? And we can relate that to humans as well. It's a fascinating conversation. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Well, in my opinion, with humans, it's both. We have our instincts. Some of our instincts help to push us in directions which are good. Some of our instincts push us in directions that are bad. Our experiences and our education and people teaching us, they also sometimes push us in directions that are good and sometimes in directions that are bad. Fascinating conversations, or fascinating monologue I'm having with myself. But yeah, if you ever want to check out a good sci-fi show, Star Trek Next Generation. One awesome thing about Star Trek Next Generation is the very last episode in the 7th season. It's an amazing episode. If you ever watched a show for several seasons and you get to the last episode and it's a real letdown, yeah, it's not like that with Star Trek Next Generation. You can get all the way through and end on a high point until you watch Picard, and then it kind of goes downhill. Anyway, that's Star Trek. Let's move on to another show that I really like. Let's move on to Babylon 5. Babylon 5 was created and written by J. Michael Straczynski. He wrote most of the episodes over the show's 5-year lifetime. And because he was writing almost all of the episodes, the show comes across as being very consistent throughout it. There's a unified vision, a 5-year story arc that was worked out before even the pilot episode was made. So it's very coherent storytelling with not just great individual episodes, but an amazing 5-year story arc that reveals itself in a very intelligent, gradual way. Babylon 5 is set in space on a huge space station with thousands of humans and aliens all trying to get along with each other. There is some politics, there is some diplomacy, there's lots of aliens and monsters in this show. There are amazing battles in space, on the station, on planets, in the solar system and elsewhere. There are battles of good against evil. There is the striving on the side of good for peace. There are some very deep philosophical questions that this show asks. Who are we on a really fundamental level? What do we want? Do we as a species deserve to continue? Are we as a species evolving? And if we are, what are we evolving into? Are there any older beings in the universe? Are we able to connect with them and communicate with them? So a lot of these deep questions are questions that I personally am interested in, and this show does a great job of stimulating thought in these areas. JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, he actually, before he made the show, he was shopping the idea around to various different studios. He shopped the idea, he presented the idea in Paramount Studios, and they didn't accept the idea, but then they, to be blunt, they ripped off the idea and they produced Deep Space Nine, which is also set in space with a space station and humans and aliens trying to get along with each other, and so many of the elements were very, very similar. And I know there are a lot of Deep Space Nine fans out there, and it's great for people to like what they like. I like some of Deep Space Nine, but to me it's a very inferior version of the original idea, which is Babylon 5, which was produced by Warner Brothers in a much more successful, a much more intelligent science fiction and effective and, I think, entertaining way. Babylon 5 is known for being really the first sci-fi show to use CGI extensively instead of any models at all. How real is Babylon 5? We're going to look at the reality, we're going to look at the morality. To me, Babylon 5 stands out as being the most realistic science fiction show that is out there. It's really good science fiction. The writer, JMS, really understands science and fairly high-level science. So he was able to inject that into the show and extrapolate it into the future in a realistic way for science fiction. Things like the way that they handle space flight, the moving of spacecraft in space. It's based on actual scientific laws, Newton's laws of motion, and it was done through computers, CGI, so they were really able to utilize proper physical laws to create the motion of their spacecraft. There are things like the weapons, pulse plasma guns, PPGs, which is not like a laser. They are actually firing pulses of ionized gas, fire like pulses of gas, which hit you and burn into you. That's something I've not seen in other shows, but that's actually quite a realistic type of weapon, especially if you're going to be seeing those pulses of plasma flying through space. You would not see lasers flying through space. There are aspects of reality in the show similar to Star Trek, similar to Star Wars, that are realistic in terms of their paranormal aspects. Telepathy. They have telepathy in Babylon 5, and they go a little bit deeper with telepathy than they do in other shows, for example, like in Star Trek. In Babylon 5, they really examine what is it like to grow up in a society of non-telepaths and be quite strongly telepathic yourself, being able to read people's thoughts, know what people are thinking, know when people are lying or telling the truth. What is it like? It kind of makes you a little bit of an outcast, a little bit unusual, and also other people look at you suspiciously. And how this show deals with the subject of telepaths by having these telepaths taken at an early age and become part of Psi Corps, which is a group, an organization of telepaths and people with psychic abilities. And then that starts to get a little bit scary in some respects, because they have more power than regular people, and they start to use their power in ways that are not always good. And so it's fascinating that they go a lot further with telepaths in this particular show. They deal with things like telekinesis, which human beings don't have, in reality very strongly, but some people do have, claim to have some levels of telekinesis. Well, they have that in the show also. One aspect of the science of the show, which is very cool, is the spacecraft is spinning. And it is spun in order to create artificial gravity on the inside surfaces of the spacecraft. They do this in a very realistic way that is not done in many other shows or even movies. 2001: A Space Odyssey did that fairly well with a spinning wheel-like space station. The movie Armageddon did it absolutely terribly when they decided to spin the Mir space station in order to generate artificial gravity to help them to speed up what they were doing on board the craft. And it was just so much nonsense that it's painful even to think about. But Babylon 5 does that well. Babylon 5 deals with the idea of there being older species of aliens in the universe. Species of aliens that are out there that are so alien, so different from us, that they're hard to comprehend sometimes. They're hard to access, to recognize. When we do recognize them, we don't always understand them. And they deal with this issue in a very, very clever way in Babylon 5. And throughout the 5-year story arc, you start to learn more about these older races, and they start to get more involved. And we realize that really we're just like insects in many respects, in what's going on in the grand scheme of things. The show does a pretty good job of bringing in religious elements. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I think there are things within religions that are quite fascinating. And a lot of people do have a lot of beliefs. And this show deals with those beliefs and examines them and deals with the philosophies in a very respectful way and considers the grounding in some of the religious beliefs that some people have in the reality of the alien community. They deal also with time and time travel in an intelligent way. There are some great episodes in Star Trek that involve time travel. There are some great episodes in Babylon 5 that involve time travel. I just wish that they would introduce some time travel in Star Wars so we can go back in time and fix the last 3 movies that were released, which really, really need to be written over. I apologize if you like them. I just, we're all entitled to our opinions. Let's think about morality. Babylon 5 really does deal with morality in a very intelligent way. The people on the show are dealing with corrupt governments. They're dealing with aliens in conflict with each other. They're dealing with some very dark forces in the universe that are sinister and walking in the shadows and hard to recognize sometimes. And there are also beings of light that are sort of pulling together coalitions, a bit like what I am trying to do on this planet with help from my alien friends, pull together coalitions of light to fight, I wouldn't say fight, to combat the forces of darkness in our world. The show has captains and commanders who are very good, solid, moral, strong people who generally try and do the right thing. They try and avoid wars. There are, in terms of the morality, they really think about higher moral questions, like dealing with the ancient species that are out there. There are species out there that are promoting conflict to speed along human evolution. There are beings out there that are trying to guide humanity towards reaching peaceful resolutions. There are also species out there that are asking questions, well, shouldn't we just leave humans alone now to get on with it themselves, even if it means facing our own destruction? I thoroughly recommend Babylon 5. It has recently been restored and remastered in high definition. So there are Blu-rays out there that I recommend. If you are going to watch that show, then I recommend that you watch, first of all, the pilot episode. It's not obvious that you have to watch that first because season 1 doesn't start with that pilot episode. It's like a special movie that came out first. That special movie pilot episode is called The Gathering, and I recommend you check it out. And as soon as The Gathering, it's fairly solid, but it looks a little bit dated in terms of some of the CGI. But you get into season 1, and it's plain sailing from there onwards. Well, I hope you've enjoyed me talking about 4 TV shows and movies, sci-fi movies, in today's episode and also last week's episode. Doctor Who, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Babylon 5. I love the idea in the future of talking more about other shows. Who knows what they may be, even some fantasy things like Lord of the Rings or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I would love to continue this conversation or monologue another time. I now have about a minute left of this show. This is the 10th pre-recorded episode that I put together to be broadcast when I was on tour. I'm still on tour. This coming weekend, I am going to be doing the Skinwalker Ranch event. If you want to come along to that, send me a message, Rupert, contact guy@gmail.com. Next Thursday, I will be back in my home, back here again after 2 months of being away, and I will hopefully be broadcasting live again. And I look forward to that immensely. I will be able to share with you all of the exciting stories and adventures that I had during 2 months of putting on alien contact events around more than half of the US. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you peace, love, and happiness. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.